I sat on the admissions committees for University of Michigan Medical School, and I would always go through a routine with these applicants and say, so if you don't get into medical school, what's your backup plan? And if somebody said, well, if I don't get into medical school, I'll go to law school or I'll go to business school, I would stop them and say, that's exactly what you should do. Because the only thing I want to hear from a applicant to become a doctor is there is no plan B. I will never stop my dream of becoming a doctor. You want to see that passion and that conviction that this is the life that they want. It's a mission and not just a job. And that's who you want in healthcare. That's who you want taking care of you.
And now, from San Francisco and the UCSF Rosenman Institute, the Health Technology Podcast with your host, Christine Winoto.
What happens when a heart surgeon sees too many patients discharged too soon with no clear way to monitor their recovery? For Dr. Jim Mault, it sparked a 25-year journey to reshape the future of healthcare. From operating rooms in Denver to boardrooms at Microsoft and Qualcomm, Jim's mission has remained the same: bridge the gap between hospital care and home through continuous remote patient monitoring. Today, as founder and CEO of BioIntelliSense, Jim is pioneering wearable technology that tracks vital signs in real time, empowering clinicians and families to catch warning signs early before they become emergency. With over 80 patents, multiple startups exits, and leadership role at major tech companies, his career blends deep clinical expertise with bold innovation. Jim shares his remarkable path from aspiring astronaut to serial healthcare entrepreneurs. We explore the origin of his passion, the turning points that shape his career, and how his technology is already transforming care for hundreds of thousands of patients across the globe. You will learn how Jim is scaling clinical insights with data, simplicity, and purpose, and why this might be his most meaningful venture yet. Here's our conversation. Welcome, Jim. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
It's been a while. I feel like I was mentioning earlier, we met almost 4 years ago, and it's amazing to see your journey with your BioIntelliSense, and you keep, plugging away, you keep, one thing after another, and I can't wait to share your story with all our listeners here. I always like to start with my guests, what your journey, what brought you to where you are today, what influenced you to take on this path?
It's a fun story. It's kind of the old adage, necessity is the mother of invention. And it really started back in junior high school when I got glasses and realized I couldn't pursue my dream of being an astronaut because in those days you had to have perfect vision to be a jet fighter pilot in order to be an astronaut. So I decided if I couldn't be an astronaut, then I might as well be a heart surgeon. And so that, I was very, shall we say, single-mindedly obsessed with that ambition, and managed to find a way to get involved, actually dissecting cadavers and being the trainer for a sports medicine, taping ankles in high school. And, that led to some fun opportunities and actually being able to graduate early from high school and starting college at the University of Michigan just after turning 17. And then, as life gives you unexpected challenges, my father suddenly died of a heart attack on my first day of college.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And so it was a tough start to my college career, and I needed to find a job to pay for school and help support my mom. And I again was fortunate, blessed, or my dad looking out for me, to meet one of the most prolific surgeon entrepreneurs of the 20th century, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Bob Bartlett, who is the inventor of many, many things that are in common use for the past 30, 40, 50 years. But the most notable is something called ECMO, extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. And he took me under his wing. I became his protege. He became my second father, and he became my inspiration to be able to have crazy ideas and publish papers and file patents and create companies, frankly. So I started my first medical technology, medical device company when I was in my early 20s, and learned a lot and built a device and licensed it to a medical device company, and it became this aha moment where I could really do both in parallel. And so I went to medical school, and I was still creating these ideas and companies and filing patents, and it really persisted. But I didn't want to give up the idea of being a heart surgeon either. So and kind of one of the take home messages that I have for a lot of whoever's interested, and I try to be the pay it forward for my mentor is to be a mentor for others in return. And some of my advice is there's real unique value in having that clinical acumen and understanding and real world bedside experience to be able to marry that with entrepreneurship and innovation and even building businesses. It's a really important combination. There's nothing in the world that's more complex than healthcare. I mean, there's just so many dimensions to it, and a lot of business. There's a lot of ideas, that don't necessarily translate into the world of healthcare unless you have an understanding of how healthcare works, and that's whether it's bedside care or how healthcare payment works or regulatory. There's just so many complexities to healthcare. So the long and short of it, kept doing heart and lung transplants as long as I could as a faculty member after finishing at Duke, going out to the University of Colorado, and then the next company got a little bigger than I could manage to keep doing both. And, it was very hard to give up the day-to-day clinical life. And I love taking care of patients, and I love being in the operating room and talking to families and so forth. But, this company was starting to take pretty significant proportions, and I ended up taking it public on the NASDAQ. And, it was moving from this, as a surgeon, you can have an impact, a big impact, especially with what we were doing, a big impact from one life to the next. But then what we're doing on the business side, as we'll talk about in a moment, is having a global impact on tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and ultimately millions of human lives. And that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, I can imagine. I think the it's almost sometimes being entrepreneur, doing product. You don't have to perform the procedures, but you get to also feel the rewarding part of it.
It
I
really
think.
is. And what's fun is for the entire company and all of my colleagues, it's more than just a business. There's that extra dimension of we're doing something that's really generating a lot of goodness, right? A lot of benefit, and a lot of people. It's interesting. I mean, even this week, somebody that we're hiring, was in a tech company, but he wanted to come work with us, and we weren't able to match what he was making in this big tech company. He said, I'm just kind of cranking widgets over there. Here, I'm going to be doing something, that's helping people, and it's fun to hear that because it's really true.
I think once you're in healthcare, it's hard to leave because it helps you find purpose. Maybe
Yeah,
it's more concrete.
absolutely. I wholeheartedly endorse that. There are some people where healthcare is hard and frustrating, and even, doctors and nurses get burned out, and I get that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not for the. I mean, I think you don't go into healthcare. I don't think I would never recommend, if you want to make a lot of money, that's not why you should go into healthcare.
Right. It's there's an easier way to get there, I think,
Yeah.
than being in
Yeah.
healthcare.
Well, and honestly, what I sat on the admissions committees for University of Michigan Medical School, and I would always go through a routine with these applicants and say, so if you don't get into medical school, what's your backup plan?
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody said, well, if I don't get into medical school, I'll go to law school or I'll go to business school, I would stop them and say, that's exactly what you should do. Because the only thing I want to hear from a applicant to become a doctor is, there is no plan B. I will never stop my dream of becoming a doctor. You want to see that passion and that conviction that this is the life, that they want. It's a mission and not just a job. And that's who you want in healthcare. That's who you want taking care of you.
Right. Yeah, no, I think definitely. I have a family friend's kid who wanted to become a doctor, and he's really passionate. He's really good. And I said, make me feel good that he's going to be my future doctor.
Absolutely. You got it.
So I want to, you have a lot of, almost like you are a serial entrepreneur. You have success after success, and company that you created got, many of the people in the device world dream is that get acquired by a larger company, get next, and then you do another one. And I feel like you have a lot of that under your belt. And so obviously you start a company when they're small, and then you become part of a larger company. And then it's almost like you go through the whole cycle again and again. Tell us, how do you? I was talking to one of founders here who started a company and it got acquired, and part of the deal is that he has to be part of the larger company, and the environment is different and how you operate is different. So I must say that the politics are a bit different too. Like, how do you navigate that? What do you learn from that lesson?
Yeah, so that's happened twice from two of my companies that I started. One, I ended up into Microsoft, and the other was a company that was acquired into Qualcomm, and yeah, it's it's a big, you know, dramatic change. Like everything, like we talked about, it has huge advantages, and then it has its disadvantages. But very typically, like you pointed out, when they're acquiring a company, especially a startup company, they want the key talent to commit to staying for usually 2 or 3 years. And I stayed at Microsoft for 3 years and had a wonderful time helping build something called Health Vault, which was really the pioneering first cloud-based electronic health information system. And, it was, again, with being inside Microsoft, you have the brand, you have the capital, the resources and so forth. But anytime you get inside a big organization, things slow down because there's more people involved, and there's more bureaucracy, and there's hesitation, if you will, about taking risk, right? The big companies are going to be more risk averse by their very nature. And the same thing was true with Qualcomm. And I ended up staying at Qualcomm for 5 years, and it was because I was having so much fun. And it was just a great organization and great leadership, and so it's been wonderful for me to have the experience inside these FANG companies or multi-billion global tech companies, learning a lot. I learned a ton at Microsoft and at Qualcomm in particular, that has now carried forward with what we're doing now. So it's all about learning, and but for me, at a certain point, both when I was at Microsoft and then when I was at Qualcomm, I got to a point where I've got, I always have this sense of urgency. It's like, I know we could do something, big, and, I don't want to wait, and I want to, I know we could start now, and it's being able to move quickly is hard for big companies. And that's why I in 2009, I had to leave because I knew what I, wanted to do. I could see it. I could taste it. I could feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I left and I started Healthy Circles. And, we built that up from 2009 to 2012. And then 2013, Qualcomm acquired it. And then same thing happened, at the end of Qualcomm. It was like, I gotta go. And
You lasted longer though at Qualcomm.
I did last longer. But the real key to all of this, obviously, I'm not an engineer. I'm just kind of a crazy recovering heart surgeon that has a lot of ideas. And so you got to find the team, and building the team and building the talent, and the chemistry and the shared vision. That's so essential to being able to successfully execute against a big idea.
And what do you look for when you're building your team? What is the recipe? Your recipe. Everybody has a different recipe, but what's your recipe?
Yeah. I mean, first and foremost is the integrity, the passion, the critical thinking, and obviously the smarts, the knowledge and experience that they bring to the table. But all of that is so key to a high performing leadership team that can work together, and crank and grind and take on challenges and solve problems together, because it's always hard, and it's always more difficult than you'd think or hope it would be, and you've got to really ensure that you don't have people who are kind of backbiters. Drama is a terrible thing for a startup company, and sniping and undercutting and any of that kind of behavior is absolutely unacceptable. And you just, you can't forgive that kind of personality disorder, because it's dysfunctional to the success. And so what's really fun is, the people, when you see people being able to work together for years and years and then across multiple companies, that tells you a lot. I mean, these are people who just know how to work together. It's a shared commitment and a shared passion and a shared vision. And that's what I've, been very, very fortunate to be able to find and assemble those teams, because that is the key to success. It really is.
I think I've worked with many different organizations, startups, small and big. And I think also the leadership is important. If the leadership is not a drama kind of leader, it tends to attract the right people, and somehow it doesn't stir drama. So it's kind of interesting how I always like to say good people attract good people, criminal attract criminal.
You're exactly right. We have that same saying. It's A's recruit A's, and B's recruit B's, and C's recruit C's, and and you also, I mean, and I've gotten it wrong many times in my career, and sadly, what you have to do is make sure that when you see something that's not the right fit, you just can't wait for it or hope for it to get better over time. You need to be decisive, and you need to say, hey, this just isn't working. And it's better for both of you to kind of, recognize that and move on. Because a lot of, again, as a small company, you can't afford to have, a persisting dysfunction. And that, so that's my other recommendations from 25 years of this in earnest, is acting decisively, right? And a lot of leadership, failure of leadership is kind of perseverating over something and indecisiveness, right? And that's I think that's crushing for an organization. If it's, I guess, partly the surgeon in me. As a surgeon, you have to be very decisive. You don't have a lot of time to sit and think about it. I'll think about it tonight, and maybe I'll do, make a decision tomorrow. And you learn as a surgeon, you have to make a decision, but it may not be the perfect decision. You might get it wrong. So then you have to be highly iterative. and you have to be highly adaptive and resilient. You have to make a decision and then see the consequence. And if it's not the right outcome, then you have to act quickly to find an alternative, right? And that's what this is all about, is zigging and zagging and zigging and zagging and problem solving. And the point is, you just keep working it until you get where you need and hope to be.
Right. Because there's no such thing as perfect solution. Everything can
No.
always be improved. So, but I think that is, even whatever you decide you think is perfect, it's not going to be perfect anyway. I think that's, but I do want to talk a little bit about biointelligence.
Great.
And how did you get that started? Like, where's that? I'm sure you come to a place where you feel like restless. I need to do something again. But tell me.
Well, you characterized it perfectly in the beginning, which is the journey, right? And this journey actually started in the late 90s. And it was a combination of things that pushed me to this 25-year journey and an obsession, which was the combination of being a surgeon, cardiothoracic surgeon in Denver, doing mostly lung surgery and then the occasional heart and lung transplant. And in Denver, we basically cover an enormous geography. So a lot of our patients come from North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Montana. And when you send these people home 5 days after, a heart operation, a lung operation, a transplant, it's really different than sending somebody home in San Francisco that's going to be 20 miles away. And so, the push to get people out of the hospital sooner meant we're sending them home, 5 days after opening their chest. And so remote patient monitoring, it almost seemed cruel to send families home and give them a pat on the back and say, okay, now it's your responsibility to take care of dad. And here's a list of stuff that you need to pay attention to. And, it puts all this, anxiety on the family. Oh my gosh, can't dad stay one more day in the hospital?
I know how that feels.
Well, yeah. And I experienced that as a family member when I was younger. And I think it's cruel and unfair. And in healthcare, we get what we deserve because patients go home and things start to go wrong and we don't know about it until they show back up in the emergency room and it's too late. I mean, now they're getting readmitted and so forth. It's not good care. And so I started really obsessing around what could we do to start to monitor people after they go home. And, it started with sending them home with a big box of equipment and, here, hook all this stuff up and measure this and measure that. And, and again, patients, they're sick. They just had big heart surgery. They're not in the mood to figure all this out, and the family member and so forth. And then I went through this with my mom in parallel. She got Parkinson's and essential thrombocytosis, and I moved her here to Denver, and they don't want to live with their kids because they don't want to impose on them. So I got her a home right down the street so I could stop and see her on the way home from the hospital. But it was one of those things where I was always choosing between getting home to see my kids before they went to bed or stopping in and checking on my mom. So it was the same thing as a family caregiver. I'd love to be able to have something that could keep an eye on my mom and let me know how she's doing medically and be able to see if there's a problem developing. So this was like a big idea, and it just at my core something that I wanted to solve, and clearly could help a lot of people and families and healthcare costs and all of these things. So yeah, I mean, that's really when it all started, and created a company in the late 90s that had a medical device. Everything I've been doing is, so the key elements are, number one, you have to figure out how to make this really simple, because patients and families, don't need a complicated burden on top of what they're already responsible for. And the same goes in the hospital. Simplicity wins, right? Anything that's complicated is going to take, more time and energy on the part of clinicians, and we're all really, really, overburdened as it is. So simplicity is the key starting point. And then number two is it has to be medical grade. It has to be something that we can rely on. And there's great stuff out there for fitness and wellness, and but they didn't go through FDA clinical validation studies. They didn't have crush testing and heat testing and shock testing and all of those reliability and safety things. So, as a surgeon and an intensivist, those devices at the bedside, I could make life and death decisions based on that information. And it's really about the information that allows us to see what's happening in order to make decisions. So that's the other key aspect. Is I saw pretty early on that we can generate all this new data from these monitoring devices, but it's really already too much data. And now we're going to add, oodles and oodles more data. So what we have to do is use our computers and these things called algorithms that could watch that data. And this is back in the, late 90s and early 2000s. And now it's cliche, it's AI, but we were doing AI 25 years ago, and watching the data coming from these devices and then saying, hey, out of all of these patients, 90% of them are green, everything's fine. But over here, these 5 or 10% are starting to show signs and symptoms and vital signs that need somebody's attention. And it's what's called exception management. And so these were very, very clear concepts for me 20 years ago. And it's really been a journey, an evolution of really the modern history of the evolution of technology, because the first device I had was a device that had a 14.4 baud modem, right? And so you have to connect your phone line, and it would dial up the internet at night and download a monitoring program. And so, it's a fun journey to see the evolution of technology to get where we are now. And so you go from 14.4 baud modems to broadband internet. You go from RS-232 cables to wireless Bluetooth, right? And so I was just so fortunate to have this curriculum along the way at Microsoft, and started to think about cloud hosting, and then at Qualcomm to be able to learn about wireless and Bluetooth. And that's when wearables started. And so then you start seeing, oh, isn't that interesting? Passive data collection. So all of this is really the culmination of a 25-year journey of both technology and an evolution of simplification, and actually not only simplifying, but also stripping the entire cost out of the equation, because the ultimate goal is for us to change the face of, in our case, patient monitoring, such that it is pervasive. It is a part of the fabric of how we take care of patients from here going forward, and never looking back. And so in that regard, in the hospital, for over a century, we've paid a human being to walk around from room to room to measure a small set of information on an occasional basis, usually once every 4 to 6 hours. And that's a small amount of information to actually be able to see if something is developing that's of concern. And so this notion of which do you think is better, an occasional snapshot or a continuous stream of information, so that we could see the trend? So moving from intermittent to continuous monitoring is a winner. The key is, can you do that in a way that's really simple and inexpensive, so that it could be used on everyone, both in the hospital and at home? See, once we send people home, we have no idea what's happening right now. And so by kind of taking advantage of all of this concept of cloud-based analytics and medical grade wearables, we are literally breaking open, forevermore, a whole new approach to better monitoring continuously across multiple parameters on every patient, regardless of whether in the hospital or at home. And what we're seeing already is mind-blowing, and it is so much fun. It's taken 25 years, but I promised my wife this is the grand finale.
Well, never say never. That it might. One of the things that I'm sure everybody, when they talk about remote monitoring, everybody is thinking like, okay, there's so many data, but you guys, I guess you focus on simplicity and make it easy and simple, because oftentimes people say, well, who's going to monitor that data? Who's going to look at data? And how do you guys do that differentiate you, that allow you to be so successful in deploying in many different sites?
Yeah, I mean, again, for better or worse, had a lot of time to think about this, and so the data. I mean, stepping back, I used to, be the director of the intensive care unit, and I spent some time analyzing how much data is generated in the operating room in the intensive care unit, and it turns out that all of those bedside monitors in the ICU and the operating room are generating on par to 1 million pieces of data per hour. 1 million pieces of data per hour. And this is no debate. The human cognitive capacity to be able to process 1 million of anything in an hour, let alone a day or even a month, is near impossible. So sadly, we've got all this data just streaming by nurses and doctors in the ICU, in the operating room, and we're missing what's actually right in front of them, because it's just too much information. And some of these changes are very subtle, right up until suddenly all hell breaks loose and the patient's crashing, right? And the sad reality is we can go back and analyze and, oh, look at that, 10 hours earlier, some subtle things were starting to happen. So as I said earlier, this is all about math, and it's all about data science and algorithms. And so, again, for many of my companies over the past 20 years, the mathematicians and the data scientists were some of my best friends, because we just needed to be able to develop the algorithms that can watch these parameters. And again, that's where having the clinical knowledge really has been helpful from my days at the bedside taking care of patients. So I know what I want to look for. I know what deterioration, what would concern me, right? Now let's write a program that can keep track of those things that would concern me, but can take advantage of being able to look at tens of thousands of data points per hour and help me be smarter. So, this whole thing about AI and people being I think we should even stop calling it AI when it comes to healthcare, because it's not artificial intelligence. These are just tools to help doctors and nurses and other clinicians be better at what they do. We want to make every clinician look like a genius, just like the autopilot system in the cockpit of every commercial airplane. Those pilots are relying on effectively AI that's watching all the data from the engines and the hydraulics and the temperature and the speed and the altitude, right? And it's reducing that down. And the autopilot basically is telling the pilots what they need to know and if there's anything concerning going on, right? So what this is all about is creating these autopilot systems to help doctors and nurses, at least as it relates to our bio buttons. So this little guy, it's a little coin-sized button. It's like a sticker that goes on every patient's chest. And we're now over 250,000 patients and doing 25, 30,000 patients per month. And now when they come into the hospital, they get a button just put on, just like a Band-Aid. And now that's monitoring all their key vital signs every minute, every hour, 24 hours a day. So the nurses don't have to spend time making manual measurements and typing that into the EMR. So that frees the nurses up to do, frankly, more important things, to take care of the patient and talk to the family and get them out of bed. Meanwhile, there's this command center where all the data is going up to the cloud, and the algorithms are watching that data for trends. Because if everything's stable, stable, good. That we like stable as doctors and nurses. Stable means I get to sleep, and so the patient, by the way. So that's green. But if your temperature is starting to trend up, even if you haven't spiked a fever, we can start seeing it go up before it's an official fever. And we see your heart rate start to go up. We see you breathing faster. Something's going on. That one needs somebody's attention. And that's the whole concept of exception management. So now in these hospitals, we have a dashboard that we created that's also been through FDA review and clearance. So these are all 510K FDA technologies. And now this dashboard allows one clinician to be able to keep an eye on 300 patients who are all being monitored minute to minute with a bio button on their chest. And then it basically highlights out of those 300, the small subset that need somebody's attention, and then that gets escalated to the bedside nurse.
Yeah.
And the benefits have been phenomenal. We just published a paper showing, number one, a reduction in nurse labor associated with manual vital signs, reducing that by 50%. And so that allows those nurses to be able to do better, more important things. We're reducing transfers to the ICU because we're able to create escalations earlier to be able to intervene on somebody that's starting to have problems. And this is also resulting in, right now, an average reduction in lengths of stay by 9 hours. And then another study after people go home with the BioButton and monitor them after they leave the hospital, showing an 80% reduction in hospital readmission and a 60% reduction in an ER visit. Again, just making it possible to see what's happening to people minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day after they go home, and then flagging it to somebody's attention. And if they're starting to have problems, giving them a call, having a telehealth visit, sending them to the clinic, or even sending somebody to the home to check on them, that's far cheaper than having them get worse and worse and then show up in the emergency room. So I'll shut up, but wow, we're having, it's wonderful now because it's all working, it's scaling. We have hospitals all over the country and even other places of the world that are now making the transition to, the next century of how we'll take care of patients.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think it's allow, like you're saying, the doctor, the nurses to do the more important work and give them room in their brain or mental state to think about something that is going to make a difference. I know we're short on time. I want to ask one last question. What's next? What you think about for biointelligence? Because you said this is going to be a grand finale, but like, what do you envision?
Oh boy. Well, I mean, we are just at the inception of this what I would say profound moment in the history of human health, which is being able to have the data, accessible from the human body, with our wearable. That means every imaginable vital sign. We're adding pulse oximetry, we're adding EKG, we're adding blood pressure, we're adding a lot of cool stuff, even beyond kind of the basics. So we're, things, like heart sounds and lung sounds and laboratory values and so forth. So, the human body has all this information that we're able to tap into passively and inexpensively. So you got to keep this really, really low cost. And that's why one of the reasons is our device is rechargeable. So it can be used over and over and over again on one patient to the next, or the same patient for months and years, because you want to take the hardware cost out of this so that it can be ubiquitous. Number two,
and good for the environment too.
Oh, and a very low carbon footprint. And then number two, all of this rich data. So we're literally kind of a two-headed beast, where we're doing all this fun, exciting stuff on the device side, and we've got multiple FDA clearances. We've got a bunch in the pipeline. But just as important is on the data side and all that data science and pattern recognition and the ability. What we're doing now is creating clinical modules that are based on, we have over 2 billion data sets now, 2 billion. It's an unprecedented set of data to be able to do pattern recognition and say, hey, this is a cancer patient, but we've got 100, 1,000, 5,000 bone marrow transplants. Let's look at, from a machine learning perspective, with all this data across multiple parameters, what does a normal course look like? And if there's a deviation from that normal pattern, then that's when we want somebody to know about it. So you start doing that for oncology and for cardiology and for pulmonary and for ortho and for CKD. So you're going to see basically just like the autopilot system is the same concept, and there's an autopilot system for a 787 and for Airbus, and so you're basically building out all these different clinical modules that have pattern recognition algorithms for to help clinicians see stuff that they otherwise would never see. It's really exciting. I mean, the next 5 years are going to be so beyond what we've been doing for the last 50 years.
Well, that's exciting. I think I talked to some of your customers, and they are so excited about your technology, your work, and I think it's going to make a difference in people's lives. So I think congratulations for all the work that you accomplished, and looking forward to see even taking off even more. So thank you for your time.
It's such a pleasure, and welcome more conversations. Thank you for helping us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for tuning into today's episode of the Health Technology Podcast. We hope you found the conversation insightful and inspiring. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps us continue bringing you the latest in health innovation. Stay connected with us on LinkedIn and Twitter for updates on upcoming episodes and more. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in healthcare. I'm Christine Minato, and thank you for listening.